Hi, this is Pastor Glenn Bake here. If you don't know me already, uh, I am just doing this here uh, video upload today in place of a men's meeting that we normally have on Thursday nights. So I was not able to actually be there for the meeting at the time it was scheduled. So I decided we'd do this virtually tonight. So I'm just going to get right into it. Forgo any normal things we do, prayer requests and some things like that first. We're just going to get right into a message tonight here. So we're going to be in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 1 through 17, or basically the chapter. And it's called Christ's Formula for True Spiritual Joy. Christ's Formula for True Spiritual Joy. Last Sunday, we were on this subject of joy for really a couple of services, and even before that in our Sunday school, a lot of what we were teaching was leaning that way. So I just thought it would be a good continuation upon that subject here this evening. So we're going to take a look here, and hopefully I have all my little things figured out here in John chapter 13. And I'll go ahead and read this text and then we'll get into it, okay? So it says, "Now before the feast of the Passover, when Christ knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God and went to God, he rises up from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself. After that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel wherewith he was girded. Then cometh he to Simon Peter, and Peter saith unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. Peter saith unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter saith unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. He's starting to get it a little bit here, right? Jesus saith unto him, He that is washed needeth not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and ye are clean, but not all. He was referring to Judas there, obviously. For he knew who should betray him, therefore he said, Ye are not all clean. So after he had washed their feet and had taken his garments and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? Ye shall be master and Lord, and ye say, Well, for so am I. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that ye should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If ye know these things, happy are ye, if ye do them. And that's where we stop there. So he says in verse 17 here, he says, If ye know these things, happy are ye, if ye do them. So we could say, in a sense, that he's saying this is instructions to be happy, and the kind of happiness he's talking about here is joy, right? Joy. So we're just going to take a few minutes tonight and look at this. Here in my notes, I have this little quote from Benjamin Franklin. Actually, he said this. He says, it is said that in my notes, it is said that Benjamin Franklin concluded a stirring speech on the guarantees of the Constitution. A heckler shouted, them words don't mean nothing at all. Where's all the happiness you say it guarantees us? Franklin smiled and replied, my friend, the Constitution only guarantees the American people the right to pursue happiness. You have to go catch it yourself. Isn't that so true, right? And we live in an age today where folks think that the government is there to make them happy and give them stuff and give them rights. By the way, the government is not there to give me rights, it's there to protect them, and the way that it protects them is by staying out of the way. Don't impede my rights with regulation or stuff that gets in the way. God gives me my happiness and my joy, and I have the right to pursue it from the government. In other words, they'll protect me to be able to pursue that right for true spiritual joy. That was the intent, at least. They don't provide it for me, and they frankly can't. They can't. So we're going to just take a look here just for a few minutes. In these verses, Jesus gives us his formula for true spiritual joy. Like I said in verse 17, if ye know these things, happy are ye if ye do them. So he's saying, take the example that I gave in these verses here and apply them so that you can have joy in your life. According to these verses, the secret to true spiritual joy is to be found in what we just read. In fact, Jesus has given us, I think we can get three principles here. If followed, will produce true spiritual joy in your life and in my life, right? The first one here is living a servant's life. Living a servant's life. If we go back here, this one here, to verses 3 through 5 first, it says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he was come from God and went to God, he rises up from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself after he had poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. And if we jump ahead to verses 12 through 16, he says, so after he had washed their feet and had taken his garments and was set down again, he said unto them, know ye what I have done to you? Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. This idea here of a servant's life, a life that is actually, even in this day and age, that is not too proud to do something for somebody else. Even those things, right, that are maybe a little lower on the list. Oh, I'm too good to do that, right? What do we see now? I think in our culture we see some of this happening where for these local folks watching, I still go to Tawas in the evening. Oftentimes I'll be down there. Some of my kids play hockey down there in the evenings, and so they'll be wanting me to run them by and grab them like a McDouble or something from McDonald's, right? And they still close at 7 o'clock every night at the McDonald's in front of the Walmart there in Tawas. Why? Because what they're saying is because we can't find enough people willing to work here. And they're paying upwards of 15. I know somebody who works in the one in Oscoda and makes about $15 an hour at McDonald's, and it's the same owners in Tawas, so I'm pretty sure it's probably about the same they're offering. But even at that, a lot of folks just aren't willing to do that, right? They're not willing, even for $15 an hour, to work at the McDonald's. obviously there's an issue with finding employment or getting employees, let's put it that way. And maybe there's other reasons for that. I'm not trying to get too into all that, but what I'm trying to say is we have a lot of mentality in our culture is because we are so blessed in this country, it's going to our heads. I'm too good for this and I'm too good for that, or I wouldn't want to step that low to help that person with that particular need. Give me a more preferred activity that I could do to go serve somebody else, right? I don't want to clean that person's house or help them clean their house. I would rather, do something else. When it comes to serving God, it's not a buffet. It's not a buffet where I get to choose this activity or that activity that I like and just turn away everything else. Or I get to choose, I like going to that service over here, but that one over there, or whatever, right? Or I like showing up to Sunday school on Sunday mornings, but don't ask me to drive a church van or something and pick kids up and all of the stress that entails, right? Whatever. I'm just throwing things out there. We do that. We do that when we decide where we're going to go to church, right? Oh, I like this church. And in fact, I just saw something on one of the local groups asking if they knew of a church that they could go to with good children's programs. And that was the basis on which they were choosing a church. Well, I'm sure every church in town would like to have good children's programs, right? Well, the issue is you got to have people who are willing to come to that church and make a good children's program, right? That means they're going to have to actually do the work of a good children's program. It also means that if that's the reason you're picking is for your own comfort, you don't pick a church for your comfort. You pick a church that is preaching what God said. And if it's not preaching what God said, then that's not the right church. I don't care how comfortable it makes you feel. And so we see this over and over, people that don't have a servant's attitude and a servant's life. Let me get back to my notes here for just a second. In these verses, Jesus teaches some powerful lessons that have the ability to permanently change the hearts and lives of those who will learn them and do them. The Lord of Lords teaches us how to become servants. There's a lesson in humility, which was kind of what I was alluding to, this idea that we might have to humble ourselves a bit in order to do what God would have us do, right? We are not more special than somebody else. We shouldn't feel like we are entitled to more or something better or higher than someone else. We all ought to be humble enough to lower ourselves for God. Lower ourselves to help someone else. Foot washing was the work of slaves. In fact, Jewish servants were never required to wash their master's feet. However, Gentile slaves who were considered dogs or an animal, right? They were, not that that's right, but I'm just saying a Jewish slave wouldn't even have to do that, right? And Jesus said, I'm going to wash your feet. I'm going to take that lowest of low jobs for you. It was the most menial and degrading work possible. Why did Jesus do this? He did it to teach his disciples and us a lesson in true humility. This is what Jesus accomplished by doing this task. Number one, the master became the servant. The master became the servant. If you want to be a leader or a good leader, you're going to have to be the leader who's willing to do the low stuff right alongside those who you are leading. And you're the first one to go do it. That's a good leader. The master became the servant. The master used this lesson to rebuke the selfish of his disciples. They were all concerned over who would be the greatest in heaven. In Luke chapter 22, it talks about this. But Jesus reminded them that true greatness is a great paradox. Men never earn the respect of others by forced obedience, but they earn respect of others by first being a servant. So, leading from behind, right? In other words, what I mean is instead of being out front, leading the work, they're behind trying to push everybody into the work. That's not good leadership. Good leadership is the one who's out in the mud in the front of the line, getting the most done, and is willing to lead by doing. And they come along beside rather than trying to lead from behind with the whip. Doesn't work too well. It works well for a little while until everybody that you were leading just leaves, right? But he became a servant. In this lesson, Jesus gives us an example to follow, right? By helping others with his burden. Galatians chapter 6, I believe it's chapter 6 here. Let me see here. Yep, Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2, it says, "Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." The law, he calls it the law of Christ, right? The example he gave was he bore the ultimate burden for us. So we ought to be willing to share in other people's burdens, problems, issues, be a help, be a comfort, be somebody who raises that person up, not tears them down. We should really strive for that. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 32, it says here, that's not the one I want, sorry, that's the one I want. "And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you." We need to be a forgiving people who are willing to forgive, and not think ourselves too high or too good to forgive. By the way, bitterness does not help you. Bitterness hurts you, and it doesn't help, and it doesn't hurt them, right? Bitterness makes no sense. So just forgive. What it does is it hurts you, makes you bitter, hard, cold, unhappy, and they don't care, right? The people that you're unwilling to forgive and you're bitter towards, they don't care. So forgive. Let it go, right? There's some people out there that they hold stuff. They're holding stuff that happened 30, even 40 years ago from some person that is probably this big of a deal, right, in real life. That person may not even remember it anymore, but you're still bitter about it, and it's hurting you, and it's not hurting them a lick. They could care less. So don't get bitter, forgive. By reaching out to someone outside the church. The ministry of a Christian is not just supposed to be within the four walls of a church. It's supposed to be in the highways and byways. That's what the Bible says. We need to be reaching out beyond the four walls of the church, out into our communities, out into our mission fields, out into our towns and counties and states and countries. We ought to be reaching the lost. There are many ways to serve. The idea that Jesus is trying to communicate is that he expects us to be about the business of serving, right? Not thinking about yourself all the time. One of the things that will rob you of your joy is dwelling on your problems, your troubles. You have a mud hole in your life, right? Everybody's got one, by the way. We all have one somewhere, some mud hole in our life, some circumstance, some situation, something that's affecting us in our life, and it's like a nasty old mud hole. And instead of, okay, yes, I know I have that, and we need to do what we can to deal with it, but there's all these other things in this world to look at. We want to fixate, obsess, and just concentrate, and that's all we ever think about is that one problem that we have, and it overtakes the rest of our life and robs us of all happiness, joy, peace. It's all gone because we are fixated on the inside and look at this terrible thing that's going on in my life, right? And that creates that selfishness then starts to grow, bitterness starts to grow, and all this negativity starts to just grow. And so instead of solving your problem, you start obsessing about it, and it starts haunting you, and it robs you of joy. Instead of focusing in here all the time about my problems, why don't you focus out there and see what you can do to help their problems? We all have problems. We don't all know what each other's problems are, but we all got them. And instead of fixating constantly on ours, spend some time concentrating on what you can do to help somebody else with their problem, and perhaps you'll find that'll help you with your problem. But we do that. We fixate on it. But if we reach outside the four walls of a church, outside our little bubble in our own life where we're just concentrating on this problem we have, get outside of that. Look at other people's lives and how you can help them instead of fixating on your own. There's a lesson here in honor. I can honestly say that we serve all men alike. We should be able to say that, right? But that means we're not holding grudges. We're not remembering somebody's slights. I kind of went over this earlier, this bitterness idea, right? We don't think ourselves above others, right? We as Christians should bear one another's burdens, but we should also not, I'm trying to remember the scriptural phrase to use there. It's just not coming to me. But don't show favoritism. This group over here, I favor this group and I reject this one. When it comes to spiritual things, God sees all of us equally. He loves all men, and is long-suffering towards all men. Not only is true spiritual joy the result of living a servant's life, but is also a result of living, number two, a separated life. A separated life. In the midst of his lesson here on humility, Jesus takes the time to teach a lesson on holiness and submission to the will of God. In these verses, he points out that a submitted and separated life is essential for true spiritual joy. My notes here are referring to verses 6 through 10 of our text, verses 6 through 10 of chapter 13 of John. It says, "Then cometh he to Simon Peter, and Peter saith unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not. Thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. Peter saith unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter saith unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus saith to him, He that is washed needeth not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit. And ye are clean, but not all." Here we see this idea that they needed to be washed, right? You need to be washed, clean. That's a separated life. He says, if you want joy in your life, you got to, remember I said that mud hole in your heart? You got to stay out of the mud. You got to stay out of the mud. You got to be separated from whatever created that mud hole, right? The mud holes that we have in our heart and in our life are usually related to some sort of sin that we are struggling with, right? And if we want to have joy in our life, we have to be separate. Well, that means there's certain things we don't partake in. There's certain things we're just not going to do because God said you ought not do it, right? There might even be some things you might choose to say, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to watch that. I am not going to go to this place. And some of that stuff might not actually be sin, but it might draw you to it, right? I've never smoked, but if I had and I had to quit, and I know it's one of the most, I think it's probably more difficult than a lot of things we consider to be worse as far as quitting it. It's very addictive, right? I wouldn't go down. I would decide I'm not going to the smoke shop in town where they have everything I want for that stuff, right? Why? Because going in there is just going to draw me towards sin, and I need to separate from that. And then there's some other reasons that we might need to separate because we are bearing a mark of a Christian, and because there might be things like modesty issues and things like that. So I might separate. I might decide I'm going to look a little different than that other person might wear or dress or do, because that's not what Christians do. That's not how they act. That's not how they dress. And I'm not talking just because it's tradition. I'm talking about stuff of modesty, and certain things. The Bible talks about don't put a mark on yourself, right? We could deal with ideas of piercings and all kinds of different things where Christians are going to look a certain way because that's what the Bible says we should do. And so that idea of separation, not only is it keeping you away from the sin that's going to drag you back into the mud hole, but separation is also going to put a mark on you, right? That says, that guy's a Christian. He looks like one, he acts like one. It's not just how you look on the outside. That's not what I mean. It's more than that. But we separate sometimes because we just know I'm a Christian. I ought to look like one. I ought to act like one, right? I ought to wear it as a badge of honor. So if we're willing to do that, what that also means is I'm willing then to go the mile for Jesus. Now I'm willing to stand out for him because I'm willing to be separated from some things of this world. And so it's part of this idea. And if we're willing to do that, and we're willing to stay out of the mud, right, and live a servant's life, then in verse 10, let me see if I can't go back here side by side. It says, Jesus saith unto him, he that is washed needeth not save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit, and ye are clean. And then he says, but not all, because he's referring to Judas here. But what he's saying here is once you have accepted the washing of Jesus, it's not just your feet that's going to be clean. It's every part of you is going to be clean. If you've accepted Christ as your Savior, that means you've accepted the washing that he offers, right? It wasn't very long ago in church that we were talking about this idea of knowing you're saved. If you want to be in a situation where you can grow as a Christian and you can be secure as a Christian, have peace as a Christian, first thing you got to do is know you're a Christian. You gotta know that, first of all, Jesus died for you. He shed his blood for you. He was buried, and he rose again and showed power over death and conquered sin for you. And there needs to be a time in your life where you've just taken a moment and said, I accept that payment you made for me. Jesus, I accept you as my Savior. An honest moment with God. If there hasn't been that, then you're probably struggling in this area of knowing that you're secure in Christ. If something terrible should happen to me today, and I went down the street or something and got in an accident and I died, I am secure in the fact that I'd be with Jesus, just like that. Do you know that like that? Are you sure about your salvation? Do you know that 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 you're saved? Have you had an honest moment with God? I'm going to tell you right now, I can't have an invitation in this little video format that I'm using right now, but I can tell you this. If you're not sure you're saved, message me. Message me. I'll talk to you about it. I'll make sure you know that you know that you know that you're saved. I won't. God will. But I'll show you what it means to be a Christian. And if you know you're saved, you're about serving Jesus and have a servant's heart, and you're willing to be humble and you're willing to be separated, and you're all in for Jesus, you're going to have a life that has more joy and more happiness, has more meaning than those who are just drifting out there. Does your life have purpose? Jesus will give you purpose. Anyway, that's all the time I got right now. If you don't know you're saved, message me. Message me here. If I'm sharing it on my own feed, message me there. But message me, ask me about that. I'll make sure that you have an opportunity. And if you're struggling with this idea of separation or having a servant's heart, deal with that stuff. But you all have a great day. I pray that this was a help to you today. I'll close this in a word of prayer, and then I'll go ahead and wrap this video up today. Lord, I just thank you for this opportunity that you've given me to share your word just for a little bit tonight. I pray, Lord, that as you have promised, it won't come back void, and Lord, that you'd use it today. And it's in your name I pray. Amen. Y'all have a good night now. See you later.